Imagine living two lives in one body. That's the world of crossdressing, and here on Mr. Sister, I'll tell you what really happens behind closed doors. I never thought a single moment could change the entire trajectory of my life. Looking back, it started on a quiet Saturday afternoon, the kind of day where the sunlight filters lazily through the curtains, and everything feels ordinary. I was 17, and like many teenagers, I had this secret. I loved clothes. Not just any clothes, but the soft, flowing fabrics that seemed to carry a kind of magic. I loved the way a skirt moved when I walked, how a dress could make even a dull day feel special. It wasn't something I told anyone. I kept it hidden deep inside because I thought it was weird, something to be ashamed of. I remember standing in my room that day, my heart thumping like it would give away the secret I'd been carrying. I had found my mother's old dress tucked away in the back of the closet, a pale lavender with delicate lace along the hem. I had tried it on before, carefully, when I knew no one was home. Felt strange at first, almost forbidden, but also exhilarating. The fabric was soft against my skin, and when I looked in the mirror, I didn't just see myself. I saw someone entirely new. Someone free. I twirled once, cautiously at first, then with a little more confidence, feeling the dress flare gently around my knees. My hands trembled slightly, but there was also this warm thrill, a kind of joy I couldn't describe. And then, as if fate had been waiting for this exact moment, I heard the soft creak of the front door opening. My stomach dropped, and panic surged through me. My mother had come home early. I froze, caught mid-twirl, the dress clinging to me like it was trying to hold me in place. My mother's footsteps grew louder, and I could feel my face turning red. There was no time to change back into my normal clothes. I knew she would see everything. My mind raced with excuses, lies, anything to explain away what I was doing, but nothing came out. When she stepped into the room, I was sitting there, on the edge of my bed, the dress pooled around me like a secret spilled too soon. For a moment she just looked at me. Her eyes softened, but there was also this piercing intensity, as if she was seeing something she had suspected but never wanted to admit. My heart was hammering so loudly that I was sure she could hear it. I expected anger, shouting, maybe even punishment. But what I saw next confused me even more. She didn't yell. She didn't scold. She just stood there studying me, and then almost gently she said, "So, you like this, don't you?" Her voice was calm, but it hit me harder than any scream could. I stammered, trying to form words, but I couldn't. Finally, I whispered a yes, barely audible, my voice trembling like the last leaf in a storm. She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine, and then she did something I never expected. She sat down beside me on the bed, carefully folding the dress around me, smoothing the wrinkles with a tender touch. "It's okay," she said softly. "I understand more than you think." The words were like a key turning in a lock I didn't know existed. She told me stories of when she was my age, how she had experimented with her own sense of self, how clothes had always been a way to explore who she was. I listened, amazed and terrified at the same time. Here I was, expecting rejection, humiliation, or at least some kind of punishment, and instead my mother was sharing herself with me, opening a door I didn't even know I wanted to go through. And then, almost casually, she said something that would change everything. "If you want, we can make this part of your life permanent. Not in a scary way, but in a way that lets you be who you really are." My chest tightened. Permanent. The word was heavy, full of possibilities and fears. Could I really imagine living like this every day, being openly myself? Could I face the world like that? Part of me wanted to run, to hide back behind the walls I had built around my secret, but another part, a deep, thrilling part, wanted nothing more than to say yes. She smiled, as if reading my hesitation, and said, "We'll take it slow, but we can do this together." That moment marked the beginning of a transformation I couldn't have predicted. It wasn't just about clothes. It was about identity, about stepping into a version of myself I had been too scared to embrace. The lavender dress wasn't just fabric anymore. It was a symbol, a promise of something new. And I realized for the first time that the person staring back at me in the mirror was ready to be seen. The days that followed were strange, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. My mother and I agreed to take things slowly, but even slow carried a weight I wasn't prepared for. Each morning, I would wake up and carefully choose my clothes. Skirts, blouses, sometimes dresses like the lavender one that had started it all. My mother didn't force me, but she encouraged me, guiding me gently, offering tips on colors, textures, and how to carry myself. It felt almost surreal, having her sit beside me while I dressed, smoothing my hair, adjusting a collar, teaching me the small, subtle ways a garment could change the way I felt inside. At first, I worried about being judged, about the world outside my room. Every time I went to school, I returned home with a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest, wondering if someone had noticed anything different about me. My mother reassured me constantly, telling me that we would figure it out together, that my identity wasn't something to hide, but something to embrace carefully. She never dismissed my fear. She acknowledged it, which somehow made it easier to face. The real challenge came when we decided to make the change permanent in a practical sense. We didn't just want me to wear the clothes secretly anymore. We wanted my wardrobe, my presentation, my very daily life to reflect who I truly was. That meant learning about fashion that suited my new identity, learning makeup, hairstyle, posture, and the nuances of femininity. My mother became my teacher, patient but firm, guiding me step by step. I remember the first time she helped me contour my face. It felt unnatural at first, alien almost, but when I looked in the mirror afterward, I saw something transforming, subtle but undeniable. I was becoming the person I had always wanted to be, the person I had glimpsed in the reflection of that lavender dress. The emotional weight of this change was heavier than I expected. Some nights I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling like an imposter, wondering if I was doing the right thing. Would my friends understand? Would my teachers? Would anyone ever accept this version of me? My mother would come in, sit quietly on the edge of my bed, and hold my hand. She didn't offer platitudes. She didn't say, "Everything will be perfect." Instead, she shared her own doubts from when she had been young, how she had feared judgment, how she had worried about being too different. And that honesty helped me more than anything else. One afternoon, we decided to do something I had been dreading for weeks, going shopping for my new wardrobe. Walking into the store, surrounded by racks of dresses, skirts, and blouses, my heart raced like never before. People glanced at me, and for the first time, I noticed their eyes linger a moment longer than usual. I felt exposed, as if every look was a judgment, but my mother stayed close, her hand brushing mine, her presence anchoring me. She whispered, "You're beautiful just the way you are. Don't let anyone else decide that for you." I took a deep breath, and for the first time in my life, I chose clothes openly, without hiding anything. I held up dresses, twirled in skirts, and laughed as my mother offered her opinions. It felt like a rebellion against the fear that had controlled me for so long. The anxiety didn't vanish completely, but it softened, replaced by a thrill I had never known, a sense of freedom, of living authentically. Back home, the transformation became more than external. My personality shifted too. I noticed I smiled more, laughed more freely, and carried myself differently. I spoke with more confidence, even if it wavered sometimes, and I began to explore hobbies and interests that I had hidden, thinking they were too unconventional. Every day, the person I had been hiding melted away a little more, replaced by this new version of me that felt right, that felt honest. Yet, despite all the progress, there were moments of tension. Friends noticed subtle changes, sometimes asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. There were days when I felt an intense longing to retreat, to hide behind my old self, to escape the expectations of this new identity. My mother never pushed me. Instead, she reminded me gently that transformation was a journey, not a race. She encouraged me to take breaks, to reflect, to feel everything fully without shame. The most unexpected part of this permanent change was how our relationship evolved. We went from being mother and child in the traditional sense to something deeper, a partnership built on trust, acceptance, and shared exploration. We talked late into the night about identity, fear, and self-expression. She shared stories from her past, from women she admired, from times when society had tried to tell her who she could be. And I shared my fears, my secret hopes, my dreams of stepping fully into this new self. The bond we formed was unlike anything I had experienced before. By the end of that month, my life had shifted in ways I hadn't imagined possible. I was no longer just experimenting in secret. I was living openly, carefully, beautifully. My wardrobe reflected my identity. My confidence grew. And though the world outside still held its judgments, I had a sanctuary, a home where I was celebrated, not hidden, a mother who had chosen to guide me, to support me, and to make sure that the transformation wasn't just temporary, but a permanent, life-changing journey. Even with the sanctuary my mother created, stepping outside my home was an entirely different challenge. The world felt larger, louder, and suddenly much more intimidating than it had ever seemed before. Every glance, every whisper felt amplified, as if people could sense the transformation even when it was subtle. I had grown comfortable in my room, in the safe cocoon of my wardrobe and my mother's guidance, but now, stepping into public meant confronting reality. The first time I wore a dress to a social gathering, a small birthday party for one of my classmates, I felt every ounce of tension knotting in my stomach. My mother walked with me to the door, offering encouragement with a quiet smile. "You're ready," she said simply, her hand resting on my shoulder. I nodded, even though my pulse felt like it would give me away. As soon as I stepped outside, the breeze brushing against the fabric of my dress, I felt a strange mix of freedom and exposure. I could feel every eye, every subtle movement of attention, and it made my heartbeat spike. Inside, I tried to smile and act naturally, but every step, every gesture was a battle between fear and authenticity. Some classmates stared, some whispered, and a few approached with curiosity, asking questions I hadn't prepared for. My voice trembled at first, my words faltering, but my mother's earlier lessons echoed in my mind. Carry yourself with confidence, speak your truth, and don't apologize for who you are. By the end of the evening, something remarkable happened. I realized I had survived the scrutiny, the whispered judgments, and in a strange way, I had grown stronger. Each smile, each small compliment from a friend, felt like fuel, slowly building the courage that had seemed impossible just weeks before. Back at home, the relief was palpable. My mother listened intently as I recounted every moment, every glance, every feeling. She didn't offer simple congratulations. She asked questions, made me reflect, helped me understand that every reaction from others was just that, reaction, not judgment. That night, I lay in bed, exhausted but exhilarated. The transformation wasn't just about clothes anymore. It was about navigating a world that hadn't changed, while I had, and learning to carry myself with integrity and grace despite that gap. Weeks turned into months, and the transformation deepened. My wardrobe expanded, my makeup skills improved, and my posture became natural, almost second nature. People began to notice not just the change in appearance, but in the way I carried myself. Confidence has a quiet power, and it started to radiate, sometimes in ways I didn't even recognize. Some friends were supportive, others confused, and a few still kept their distance. But through it all, I learned to value the opinions of those who mattered and let the rest fade into background noise. The most challenging moments weren't external, though. They were internal. There were nights when I questioned if this permanent transformation was truly who I was, or just a reflection of someone I wanted to be. Doubt crept in like a shadow, whispering fears that I hadn't faced before. Was I ready to live like this forever? Could I sustain the courage it required? Every hesitation felt monumental. But my mother's presence was unwavering. She never forced answers, never shamed me. She simply reminded me that transformation was a journey, that uncertainty was part of growth, and that embracing change didn't mean losing myself. It meant discovering who I truly was. One particularly difficult day, I had an incident at school that tested me more than anything before. A group of students made pointed comments, trying to provoke a reaction, attempting to unsettle me in front of everyone. My stomach churned, my hands trembled, and for a moment I wanted to retreat, to hide in my old identity, to disappear into anonymity. But then I remembered the countless afternoons spent with my mother, the lessons learned, the countless tiny victories that had led me here. I stood tall, looked each of them in the eye, and responded calmly, firmly, without anger but with unshakable confidence. Their laughter faltered, their comments lost power, and I felt a surge of pride I hadn't known was possible. When I returned home that evening, I collapsed on my bed, overwhelmed. My mother knelt beside me, gently brushing a strand of hair from my face, and simply said, "You faced them. You didn't run. That's real strength." Tears blurred my vision, a mix of relief, pride, and exhaustion. That night, I understood something profound. The permanent transformation wasn't just about clothing, makeup, or appearance. It was about identity, courage, and resilience. It was about facing the world fully without apologies, and knowing that, at least in this room, at least with my mother by my side, I could always be myself. From that point forward, my transformation was no longer just private or experimental. It became part of who I was, woven into every choice, every interaction, every glance in the mirror. And with each passing day, I felt stronger, freer, more alive than I had ever imagined possible. The lavender dress, the lessons from my mother, the small victories over fear, they had all led me here, to a place of authenticity and self-acceptance that felt permanent, undeniable, and deeply personal. By the time spring arrived, my life had changed in ways I hadn't anticipated. The transformation that began with a single lavender dress had grown into something far bigger than I could have imagined. My wardrobe overflowed with skirts, blouses, and dresses in every shade and texture. My reflection in the mirror no longer felt like a secret. It was me, fully realized, fully present. But even as I embraced this identity, life had a way of testing my resolve in ways I hadn't foreseen. One afternoon, my mother suggested we try something new, attending a local art class. It wasn't just a class. It was a space filled with people I didn't know, strangers who would see me as I truly was. My heart raced at the idea. I felt both excitement and terror at the thought of being seen openly in my chosen identity, in a public space where anonymity offered no protection. My mother's calm confidence steadied me as we walked to the studio. "Remember," she whispered, "you are not doing this for anyone else. You're doing it for yourself." Inside, I felt every glance. Every subtle movement of eyes across the room seemed amplified. My hands trembled as I arranged my sketching materials, and yet, beneath the anxiety, there was a thrill, a pulse of life that made my chest feel light. For the first time, I realized how much courage this transformation required. Not the courage of defiance, but the quiet, steady courage of simply existing as yourself when the world isn't always ready to accept it. The class began, and slowly, the room faded into background noise. I focused on my art, letting my hands move naturally, creating lines and shapes that felt like extensions of myself. Occasionally, I glanced around, noting the curious looks, the subtle whispers. And then something unexpected happened. A fellow student, a woman with bright eyes and a warm smile, approached me. "I really like your style," she said casually, gesturing at my dress and the way I carried myself. Her compliment, so simple yet genuine, struck me profoundly. For the first time, I realized that acceptance could be offered freely by strangers, that courage met with kindness could transform fear into joy. When we returned home, my mother listened eagerly as I recounted the experience. She smiled, a knowing, quiet smile, and said, "You're learning that the world isn't always cruel. Sometimes it surprises you." Her words lingered with me, echoing in my mind as I began to navigate more public spaces in my transformed identity. Yet, even with these victories, challenges remained. Not everyone accepted me, and some encounters were uncomfortable, even painful. A few peers at school refused to use my chosen name. Others made careless remarks about my appearance. Each time, I felt that familiar knot of anxiety, the urge to retreat. But then I remembered my mother's words, the countless afternoons of practice, the moments of triumph over fear. Each time I faced the challenge, and each time I grew stronger, more grounded in who I was. The emotional transformation was as significant as the physical. I began to see myself differently, not just in the mirror but in my mind, my heart, my very presence. Confidence seeped into corners of my life I hadn't realized were hollow. I spoke more openly with friends, engaged more fully in conversations, and even started exploring new hobbies I had once dismissed as not for me. The person I had been hiding, the one who lived in secret, afraid and constrained, was dissolving, replaced by someone vibrant, authentic, and unafraid to claim space in the world. One evening a turning point came. My mother suggested we try a small outing to a local cafe, a place crowded and bustling with people. My stomach twisted with nerves. This was a real test, not just of appearance but of composure, presence, and authenticity in the world. We entered, and for a moment, the anxiety was overwhelming. Every glance felt sharp, every whisper magnified. But then I noticed something remarkable. A few people smiled at me genuinely. Others barely noticed me at all. My mother sat across from me, her calm presence anchoring me. I took a deep breath and realized that the power to navigate the world wasn't about avoiding judgment. It was about embracing who I was with quiet confidence. By the time we left, a subtle but profound shift had occurred. I wasn't just surviving the world as my transformed self. I was beginning to thrive. Every step, every glance, every interaction reinforced the truth that permanence didn't mean limitation. It meant authenticity. And in that permanence, I discovered a freedom I hadn't known existed. Back at home, I stood in front of my mirror, examining the reflection that had once terrified me. The person staring back was no longer hesitant, no longer hiding. My mother entered quietly, placing a hand on my shoulder and said, "You've come so far. And you're just getting started." Her words, gentle yet full of certainty, filled me with a quiet exhilaration. The lavender dress, the lessons, the moments of fear and triumph, all had led to this point. A life where my identity was no longer a secret, where transformation was not temporary but permanent, and where the journey of self-discovery continued every day, with courage, love, and resilience guiding every step. By the time summer arrived, my life felt entirely different from the one I had known. The transformation that had begun with a single lavender dress months ago was no longer a secret, no longer a tentative experiment. It had become permanent, woven into every part of who I was. I had learned to walk, talk, and carry myself with confidence, but more importantly, I had learned to embrace myself fully, without fear or apology. Some days were easier than others. There were still moments of doubt, brief flashes of anxiety when I faced strangers or walked into unfamiliar places. But each challenge had become an opportunity to reinforce my own strength. My mother remained my constant guide, confidant, and friend, reminding me gently that transformation wasn't just about appearance. It was about courage, integrity, and self-acceptance. Her unwavering support had given me the foundation to face the world with authenticity and grace. School had become a place of quiet triumph. Friends who had once been hesitant began to see me for who I truly was, not just my appearance. There were still those who whispered or judged, but their voices no longer held power over me. I had discovered a resilience I didn't know I possessed, a confidence that had grown from months of practice, courage, and honesty. Each smile, each small gesture of acceptance, felt like affirmation that I was living my truth. The lavender dress that had started it all became symbolic, a reminder of the journey I had taken. I kept it carefully, sometimes wearing it on special days, sometimes just holding it in my hands and feeling the soft fabric, remembering the fear, excitement, and hope I had felt the first time I tried it on. It wasn't just clothing. It was a marker of transformation, a tangible representation of courage and self-discovery. One afternoon, my mother suggested we take a walk in the park, just the two of us, to celebrate how far I had come. The sun was warm, the air fresh, and for the first time, I realized how completely I had embraced my identity. As we strolled, we talked about everything. Future plans, hopes, dreams, and the small victories that had built the foundation of my transformation. She smiled at me and said, "You've grown into someone truly remarkable. Not because of what you wear, but because of who you are inside." Those words resonated deeply. I understood then that the permanent transformation was more than clothing or appearance. It was the courage to be seen, the willingness to face fear, and the commitment to living authentically every day. I had become someone I was proud of, someone my younger self could only have dreamed of becoming. The anxiety and doubt hadn't vanished completely, but they had been replaced by strength, resilience, and a profound sense of self-acceptance. By evening we returned home, and I stood in front of my mirror once more. I traced the lines of my face, adjusted the folds of my dress, and smiled. The person staring back at me was no longer hidden, no longer hesitant. She was fully me, fully present and fully alive. My mother appeared quietly behind me, placing a hand on my shoulder. We stood in silence for a moment, two women connected by love, trust, and shared experience. That night, I lay in bed reflecting on the journey. From the thrill and fear of trying on my first dress in secret to the courage of stepping into the world as my true self, every moment had shaped me. I realized that transformation wasn't just about appearance. It was about embracing vulnerability, confronting fear, and discovering the strength that comes from living authentically. And in that quiet moment, I understood something profound. My life would never be the same, and that was exactly how it was meant to be. The lavender dress, the lessons, the fears, the triumphs, they had all led to this permanent, beautiful transformation. I was no longer hiding. I was no longer pretending. I was fully myself, and I had the love, guidance, and courage to carry this identity with pride every day. As sleep finally came, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had stepped into a life that was authentically mine, and the journey, with all its twists, challenges, and revelations, had made me stronger than I had ever imagined. The future stretched out before me, full of possibility, confidence, and the quiet, enduring joy of being completely, unapologetically me. And with that, I finally knew. I was home in my own skin, and nothing would ever take that away from me. The end.